What up, what up, everybody? This is the Dr. Football Ultimate Patriots podcast. I am your host, Dr. Dennis Tien, recording remote from my real live medical office. Joining me always, the CEO of Hedge Better, Justin Fine. This is 1 hour of commercial-free football talk. Football coverage is hard to find this time of year. We are in May. It is the absolute dead of the NFL offseason. Things are about to heat up with mini camps, but you can bang in here and get 1 good hour on the Pats and everything NFL. Justin, what is going on, my man? How are you this afternoon?
I am doing well. Excited to talk about this this draft. I know we're a little late to the game, but there's a lot of exciting stuff to talk about. I'm excited. I'm looking forward to getting into it.
We're a little late, but I think, we said we were going to do the draft recap episode, and, there is a lot to talk about in this draft.
Absolutely.
And I think it is nice, I think, to have a little bit of time on this too, and to kind of just let everything digest and to take a look at who we think moved the needle around the league. And I think, and we're going to maybe get to that later. I want to start with the Pats. This is a Patriots podcast, and I want to start with the Patriots and what they did. I have a couple takes on the Patriots. The last time we recorded was after round 1 and before round 2. So we've had the time to sort of not only see, but digest everything the Pats did in the draft. And I have 2 takeaways from that, and we'll get to both of them. I'm going to fire them both, and then we'll go one by one. Number one is, this was the draft the Patriots needed the last 7 years. This year's draft, this was what they needed to do. Now, none of us have any idea which of these players are going to be good and bad. I mean, that's going to take years to tease out, and we know that. But I think what you can do is you can look and say, do I like how they approached the draft? Do I like the chances they took? Do I like the way they filled needs on this roster? And in my book, you could go back to really 2018, 2019, the last couple years of the Belichick regime, and certainly even the last couple of years of the Brady regime, right? And this was the draft you needed to have, where they just made that big investment of draft capital in this offense. And they, for whatever reason, Belichick refused to do it. They did it this year. They stabilized this offensive line with 2 studs in the first 3 rounds, a center and a tackle. And then they brought in speed and skill players with the other 2 picks, a pass catching running back, which they desperately need, and a quick wide receiver that was not just a guy that can win a 100-meter dash like Tyquan Thornton, but an actual guy that was productive in college and is an actual football player and has football field speed. And I think his name is Kevin Williams, right?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
Kyle Williams.
Kyle Williams. Yep. Excuse me. So add it all up, and I like the way that they approached this draft. This was the draft they needed for 7 years.
Yeah, I agree. And to me, I think one of the reasons why I like it so much is because they didn't overcomplicate it. They took good value players in positions that they needed when they should have taken them. Like, we had gotten so used to the Patriots always trying to be the smartest organization in the room, the smartest team in the room. And we had all these draft picks year after year under the Belichick regime that went by, that we left us kind of scratching our heads. I mean, even going back to last year with Mayo, I was like, we saw a couple picks and we couldn't really, justify it. And we would look at guys that were still available on the board and say, oh, look at who we passed up on and all this stuff. And I just feel like when I look back at this draft, we got good players, good value, and we weren't too afraid to draft skill positions or do this or do that. I mean, I look at this draft and I really think we just kept it simple. We just took good players where they should be taken, and we got value at positions that we needed.
Agreed. And they took productive players, and they took players from good programs. These are just basic things of drafting. Like, you don't know what's going to happen, but where are you going to plant your flag? Like, where are you going to take those chances? And they did that on guys that clearly were producing in college. There's no Tyquan Thornton where you have to, extrapolate his skill set to the next level and be like, this guy's going to be great in the NFL, even though he was mediocre in college. I'm so tired of that. I'm so tired of the way the Patriots did that. That stuff may have worked 20 years ago. It didn't work the last few years for the end of the Belichick regime. So I love that. I'm tired of them also. I think they drafted, Justin, and maybe you'll agree with this, they drafted 2 the way the game is played in the league right now, which is something Belichick refused to do. And that might have been his undoing, frankly, in his last 2 years in New England, is that he stuck to older methods and older kinds of players that I don't think really translated as well to the modern game. I mean, Tyquan Thorntons and Cole Stranges and Kyle Duggars and Marte Mapus, when they had huge glaring needs at skill position, and finally this year they just went and they took these guys.
They did. They did. They went in and like, you look up and down, I'm looking at it right now. And I mean, we said they need help in the trenches on both sides of the ball. They got help in the trenches. We said they needed some help on offense. They went out and they got a potential, what we're hoping will be an electric playmaker in the second and third round with their running back and wide receiver combo. Like, they got some good draft with guys later on in, the fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh rounds that could potentially add value to the roster. Like, they just they went out and, like I said earlier, they just addressed their positions of needs, and they did it smartly. They didn't really take anybody that left me scratching my head going, what the hell did we just do?
Yeah, the only one. I mean, there's a couple little things I think you could point to, like the safety from California. People seem to say he was a reach. Craig Woodson in the
Right.
fourth round. That might be one I'd question a little. You know, drafting a kicker. I mean, I hate that they had to draft a kicker. They kind of painted themselves into that corner. So they had, I mean, they need a kicker and they don't have a real kicker on this team. So they had to put some draft capital in the kicker. But even the fourth and fifth round pick, Farmer and Swinson,
Exactly.
the lineman from Florida and the edge rusher from LSU, these are guys that were best player available picks, super
Yes.
productive guys in college that played for big time programs that fit needs on this roster, and that very reasonable gambles to take for where they were taken in the draft.
Super, super reasonable. And I mean, I think the other message that, like, they clearly sent is that they're coming to get their second year quarterback some help. I mean, the
Yep.
first four picks all centered around helping Drake May in that offense. You beef up that line, you get him a new tackle and a new center, you get him new weapons, bring in a running back and a wide receiver who can hopefully, all four of those guys can hopefully have day one impacts. And then after that, they switched to defense and they rounded out that defensive side of the ball where they saw value. And like you just pointed out, I thought Joshua Farmer and Braden Swinson are going to be two great value picks that are going to be names to look for this coming season. I think they'll contribute and they'll play meaningful snaps.
Yeah. What do you think about the second round pick, Trevion Henderson? That was probably my favorite pick of this draft for a couple of reasons. One is we've been saying, you can go back and pull like previous episodes of this podcast. Like,
Yeah.
we've been saying for how many years they need a running back that can catch the ball. They haven't had that since James White retired. So he fills that need. They need speed. He fills that need. You can't count on Rhamondre Stevenson. I'm sorry. He
No.
fumbles too much. He's not as good as Patriots fans think. I don't want him getting more than like 200 carries a year, if even. He also has a wicked injury history, by the way. So I think in Henderson, you're bringing in a guy that will spell Stevenson and Gibson. You do not have to rely on Stevenson if he fumbles the ball. He's a wicked pass blocker, by the way, best pass blocking running back in this draft, which is huge. He can catch the ball. And in a Josh McDaniels offense, a guy like Trevion Henderson is going to thrive.
He's definitely going to thrive. And I think the thing that I'm potentially the most excited for is, obviously, I think this guy can contribute. I think he's a little bit of a different kind of running back than Ramondre. But I'm curious to see if we get the best version of Ramondre now that they have somebody like Travion Henderson to pair him with. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, if we can lighten up Ramondre's workload a little bit, maybe not overcomplicate as far as what we're asking him to do we get a better, more serviceable version of Ramondre? Because he was not, he has not been a bell cow back the last few
He is
years.
not. And I think that Patriots fans need to wrap their head around the fact
Right.
that Rhamondre Stevenson is not a 3-down back. They've tried that experiment 2 straight years and it's failed both times. He's too injury prone, he's too fumble prone, and he's frankly not good enough. I mean, he's a good back. He's a piece, but he's not a 3-down back.
No. So I'm really excited to see that, to see a tandem of these two guys back there. I think it's going to help. And you know what? If they're running behind a much improved offensive line too, obviously that helps a ton, which this O line should be. The Jared Wilson pick, that was sneakily one of my favorite picks
Love that pick.
I loved it just because like that's not a pick that I felt like they would have made in the past. Like that guy was had so much value. I couldn't believe, they put a grade on him of, I believe it was like maybe like as early as like the back of the second, like into the
Yes,
third.
yes.
And so to get him where you got him in the fourth, like that was just great value. And I love that they did it. And again, another big time guy from a major school. And from everything I've seen about him, the kid is freakishly athletic and he's smart.
Yeah, that's it. He's freakishly athletic. He ran a 4.84 in the 40. He's a smart guy. He played at a big time program. I would compare this pick to like, look, in a fantasy draft, drafting him in the third round, you draft a starting center. You just drafted the best center in the draft in the third round. It's like that guy that goes and drafts like Chuba Hubbard in like the seventh or eighth round, right? And he ends up getting 10 touchdowns and being more productive than all the guys that were taken in the first and second round. It's just a classic value pick. You're getting a guy that is going to be a starting lineman in the third round of the draft, but he's maybe a little undervalued because he is a center.
Yeah. And you know what? I mean, I know they got a couple other pieces, in that offensive line, some other guys, some holdovers, some new guys that are coming in, but it's like, it really feels like they have the potential to lock up that left tackle and center position for the next 8 to 10 years after this draft. And that's huge.
I mean, you got to admit, you're feeling way better about this offensive line now that they drafted Campbell, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
I mean, any more thoughts on the Campbell pick now that you've had a little bit of time to digest it? The one take I will say about that, we talked a little bit about this last time, but I do think it's worth mentioning again. Like this guy's measurables are off the chart, like at every single parameter except for arm length. Like people need to stop being so fixated on this one little thing. This guy is a total beast that checks literally every single box you would want in a left tackle, except his arms are just this much too short.
We talked about it, an eighth of a freaking inch. And not only that, but it's like from everything I've heard about Will Campbell, he maximizes his length and uses his length to the best of his ability. So I mean, I think I think it's more of a media headline than it is a reality in terms of something that we need to worry about.
Agreed. And I mean, I'm expecting this guy, they take him 4th pick in the draft. You take a tackle with the 4th pick in the draft. I'm expecting him to be the starting tackle of this team for the next decade.
Yeah, me too. And I got to say, and I know we talked about it right after the draft. Talk is cheap, right? But it's a start. It's a good start. And from everything I've heard out of Will Campbell's mouth so far, and like from everything like I've just seen and the way he's been interviewed and what he just the way he presents himself, like I feel like we're just getting like a tough, gritty football player who whether it's this year or next year is going to be a captain of that offense, like locker room leader. Like it seems like we found a guy who is going to be a staple of this organization for some time.
I completely agree. He completely has that personality. It's been well documented. Everyone's talking about it. I mean, the question with all these guys always can they do it on the field? Time will tell that. But my expectations are high. Love that pick too, and I think he will be a huge piece of what I think will be a much improved Patriots offense this year. The 3rd round pick, Justin, we haven't talked about the other one, Kyle Williams. I mentioned his name a second ago, but I love this pick. What this pick makes me wonder is what this wide receiver room is going to look like this year. And I'm looking right at Jalen Polk, Javon Baker, Kendrick Bourne. Like, Diggs is going to be on the team. Hollins is going to be on the team. You just drafted Kyle Williams. I would think Pop Douglas will be on this roster because he's showing that kind of playmaking, that he has a role. There's definitely going to be an odd man out or two in this wide receiver room.
There is, and the one I look at this Patriots receiving room, and the one thing, and again, like I like the Kyle Williams pick. I think, I have pretty high hopes for him. But the one thing that this team still like doesn't really have, and they tried their best like to fill this role with Kayshon Boutte last season, but they don't have that big bodied, overly physical, like tough to match up against deep threat, right? And that's something we've been wanting them to go after for years. And I don't think they have a receiver on this roster that fits that archetype. But what they do have is a bunch of fast, quick, twitchy,
Yep.
playmaking type guys, and maybe that's the identity they're going for.
Well, and don't forget who the offensive coordinator is. I mean, that's Josh McDaniels MO. Like he's
Right.
always been about those quick, twitchy guys. And one of the things I love about the Kyle Williams pick is this, it's not just the player sometimes, but it's where the player ends up, the system and the situation they're in. And you're going to have Drake May feeding him the ball, and he's going to be in that Josh McDaniels offense. McDaniels offense lines up really well with Kyle Williams' skill set and physical abilities.
They do, and don't forget. I just saw the other day that there was an undrafted wide receiver. I forget the kid's name that they apparently McDaniels really likes. They just signed him to a deal.
Right.
So it's like, you gotta figure that kid's probably making the team. Williams probably makes the team. So yeah, there's a couple of people that are going to be.
Is there any chance Jalen Polk is gone, one and done this year?
Yeah, I think both. If you ask me right now who the odd ones out are, it's got to be, as of today, Jalen Polk and Javon Baker.
Vrabel, I think, has already kind of shown like he's not chasing Elliott Wolf and Bill Belichick's mistakes. Like he has total control over this thing, and he is not afraid to send someone packing. I mean, look at the guys he's cut all these veterans, right? Yep. How many guys that he cut? He traded Joe Milton. He cut like everyone that was a captain, everyone that had won a Super Bowl, including Joe Cardona, who was the last holdover, all gone. So Vrabel is not afraid. He's not throwing good money after bad. So I think Jalen Polk is probably gone unless he has a really strong camp.
He would have to. The thing that really is unfortunate is the fact that both him and Baker, you can't really say they got a fair shake with things last year. You know what I mean? You got a rookie quarterback. You have Alex Van Pelt and Gerard Mayo like calling the shots. And it's just like, it's tough to assess them, but I would say they're on the outside looking in, heading into this camp. Like
I see it as,
I think,
Yeah, I think you got one roster spot for three guys. I think Polk, Baker, and Kendrick Bourne are probably all competing for that last spot in that wide receiver room. I mean, I don't know. I've heard people speculate Kayshon Boutte could be gone. He was really productive last year once Drake May got in there. I feel like you got to keep him around.
And unless I'm mistaken, I think he's our biggest bodied guy.
Mac Hollins.
Oh, sorry, yeah, you got Hollins now, but
right.
But yeah, no, exactly to your point. There's a couple of guys that I think are on the outside looking in, and it just really depends in the direction they want to go. I think they'll all have a chance, but I mean, yeah, if you ask me who's not making this team right now, I would have to say Polk and Baker. And again, that would just be so unfortunate because Polk was second round, right? Second round pick?
Yeah, high second round, 37.
Second round pick. So it's just like, that would be so disappointing.
How great would you be feeling about this team right now if everything had been the same, but they just had Ladd McConkey?
So much different. So much different. Yeah. And what did just to play it out, when they traded back that pick with the Chargers, what did they get for it? Has that manifested itself yet?
They got, I'm sure it has, but I'd have to look that up. But I know that it was, obviously it was Polk was the pick they took with the second round pick. And then I think I'd have to look it up.
I'm curious what else they got, because I'm assuming it was another pick, maybe a later round pick from the Chargers. I'm curious how that played out, but it's like, that's looking like such a awful trade right now at this point in time.
Right. It certainly is. It looks like the Patriots got back they didn't get much. They moved down 3 spots and they picked up the 137th pick and they picked up the 110th pick, but they also gave up the 137th pick. And then they took that 110th pick for Javon Baker. So they got Jalen Polk and Javon Baker.
The two guys that we're talking about will probably be cut.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. So that was not the best trade, but Vrabel will have no gumption or reservations about cutting Jalen Polk or certainly Javon Baker if he feels like it. And I think Kendrick Bourne I think it's an uphill battle for him to make the roster, given where he's been the last year, in his injury history.
The one thing I'll say about Kendrick Bourne is he's shown that when he's healthy, he can be a productive like number 3 guy. You know what I mean? And if you had to ask me who I'd rather take a roster spot up with, I'll give it to the veteran who's shown that he can make plays over taking another chance on Jalen Polk or Javon Baker. Like if you ask me, like I'd cut those two before I get rid of him, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that's a fair point. It's gonna come down to training camp. And I think for Polk to make the team, like I mean, look, Javon Baker was a 4th round pick who did nothing his rookie year. So if he gets cut in
Right.
year two, I mean, and he was a clown off the field. So if he gets cut in year two, no surprise
No.
there. Bourne is a as an aging veteran who had a bad knee injury, hasn't been productive since he came back. And he's someone that you could totally see getting cut. Second year picks don't get cut. Second round picks don't get cut in their second year,
They
especially when they're
shouldn't.
high second
Yeah.
rounders,
Right.
unless they really bomb out. But that's kind of where Polk is. Like he's gonna have to come in and have a strong camp and fight for that spot in order to make this roster. Is there anything, Justin, about this draft that you didn't like? Anything the Patriots did that you wish they had done?
You know, I feel like I'm nitpicking because, as we mentioned, I really loved Travion Henderson in the second round. I was actually at the time, to be honest, I was hoping they were going to take Luther Burden, who went the very next pick to the Bears, just because I felt he was a more of a sure thing at wide receiver. Um, but I have no qualms with them skipping him for Travion Henderson, as we talked about, all the value that Henderson brings. Uh, I mean, I'm looking at the draft now, and you know, I think they did a good job with what they, with what they could have. There was a couple of spots where I was hoping maybe they would trade back up into like the back of the first or the second rounds.
Yeah.
And obviously they didn't do that. But other than that, I was pretty happy overall.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree with that. And I will say the one little nitpick I would have, there's probably two. One is I would have liked them to take a developmental quarterback,
Mm,
especially with trading Joe Milton. You took a chance on this guy. It didn't really work out. I think more for off the field reasons.
yeah.
He's immensely talented. I don't think he's a great quarterback at the NFL level, but he was sort of your lottery ticket. You've traded that lottery ticket elsewhere.
Right.
I would have liked them to take a chance on one of these lottery ticket guys. Ewers from Texas who ended up going really late or something like that,
Right. Right.
just to
Right.
have another developmental body. So that's number one. The biggest criticism I have of the draft is I really would have liked them to have taken another running back in like the 5th round or something like that. Because I really feel like you're going to think this is crazy. I was going to bring this up when we were talking about Stevenson, but you changed the subject to the center. But I wonder if Ramondre Stevenson is even going to be on this roster this year. I don't know. I just have a feeling he's a potential training camp type cut, a surprise cut. There's always one of those. I would have liked another young body at running back, maybe to facilitate that a little. Get another young guy in here that can take some carries and roll with Antoine Gibson and Henderson.
I wouldn't have hated that at all. And you know what? Look, if they cut Stevenson or trade Stevenson, I'm not going to complain at all. As a matter of fact, I'll probably breathe a sigh of relief, to be
Right.
completely honest. So, um, yeah, that could have been nice. Um, but you know what? By the same token, I don't hate the, well. Let's wait and see and give it just a little bit more time and see if maybe we can get the best version of Ramondre now that we got Travion. I don't know, but yeah, I agree. If they got rid of him, I wouldn't be mad at all.
Yeah, he's expendable, completely expendable in my book. All right, let me get to my second take about the draft and the way this all went. We just kind of spent like 15 minutes talking about the first one, but this is more like a big picture thing, which is taken in totality. You look at this free agent class, you look at this draft, and I think you'd agree with me. I think most people would agree with this take. They moved the needle on this franchise this year. Like this is going to be a much, much better team. I think that they had the draft they needed to have to be a borderline playoff team. I think they had the free agency class they
Mhm.
needed to have to be a borderline playoff team. And looking at the schedule, looking at the coaching, looking at everything, they have moved the needle really from the second the offseason began, firing Gerard Mayo, doing what they had to do to get Vrabel in here, restructuring the front office, aggression in free agency, and now the draft they had. I think they've gone from like a 4-win team to like a 8 to 10 win team easily.
I couldn't agree more. I mean, I think, it's obviously wasn't perfect, but to your point, I think this was arguably as good of an offseason as we could have asked for and as good of an offseason as I can remember. Um, and I bet them to make the playoffs. Like, I'm very bullish on this team
Yeah.
this year. I
I
think
bet them to win the AFC championship game.
I love that. I
I
love
already
it.
put it in for like $50 to make like $6,000 or something.
Why not? Dude, I love it. Look, there's really,
Pull it up right
if you
now.
think about it, is there a single area where this team is going to be worse off this year than they were last year? I feel like they've improved at every level, both coaching
Agreed.
staff and roster, right? And
Yep.
we talked about last year, like how many close games could have, gone the other direction, and all of a sudden they would have gone from a 4-win team to a 7 or 8-win team. So it's like, I look at the fact that, I think they're going to win a couple of those close games this year. I think they're a much better team this year, a much better coach team, a much more talented team, and they have a much easier schedule. Like, all that leads me to believe that this can easily be a 9-10 win team, and potentially even more, depending on how big of a step Drake May takes, and how impactful some of these acquisitions are.
Well, I think you just hit the nail on the head, because to me, this really does all come down to Drake May and what he is. And as much as I am bullish on May, I wanted them to draft him. I like him. I thought he really showed he had a great rookie year, but he didn't win much, right? He looked good, but he didn't actually win. He was 1-10 as a starter. I think he showed a lot of us that his ceiling is even higher than we hoped it would be. Like, this guy's ceiling is top of the league. I really believe that. But that doesn't mean he's guaranteed to be the answer at quarterback. I'd put my confidence level at him being successful this year at somewhere around 60-70%. And if he is successful, then they will be a playoff team. But if he's not, then it's going to be obviously a huge setback for the franchise. But to me, that's really the biggest question on this team right now is Drake May really what we hope he is?
Yeah, and you know what? Look, here's all the things that Drake May's got going for him this year. I mean, you talk about the fact that he's got an improved offensive line, he's got improved skill players, he's got improved coaching, not only from the OC standpoint, but from the head coaching standpoint. He's got a full offseason to prepare to be the day one starting quarterback, right? So, in obviously just another year of development, he's not a rookie. So all of those things go in the positive column for Drake May. Here's the one thing that we have to just, I think, bring up, and we bring it up with a lot of quarterbacks. I've talked about this a ton of times, is Drake May had zero pressure on him last year.
That's
right?
very true. Very fair.
And I think that we talk about this as part of being, part of the intangible component for a quarterback. And when the bright lights come on and you're all of a sudden expected to make plays, and you're expected to win games, you're expected to perform, it's not just a cherry on top if you go out there and look good. That has an impact on the way some people play, especially quarterbacks.
Yeah,
So
agreed.
from everything I've seen from Drake, I feel like he's got that intangible. He seems to be pretty mentally sturdy. He seems to be, he seems to want to be a big game player, and I hope he is. But that to me is the biggest question mark this year, because everything else we can say is better off and improved as compared to last year. But now he's got to play with expectations.
He's got to play with expectations, and it's going to be a totally different game. And he's really going to have very few excuses that he can call on at this point, to say, I mean, the one thing they didn't get this offseason, and I think we discussed this a few episodes ago, and I'm totally okay with this, by the way, because you just couldn't totally rebuild this team in 1 year.
Right.
They didn't get that big name wide receiver. I mean, Diggs is better than what they had. I don't think he's a true number one. They're not going to have a true number one this year. So maybe that's the one little thing you'll be able to look at and say, well, he still lacks that. But I'm sorry, if he is really what we hope and think he is, and I'm talking about Drake May, he should have a really good year with this team around him. They've got a lot of weapons. They're going to have a much better offensive line, much better coaching. There's very few excuses. I don't want us to get into like the Trevor Lawrence mode where we're just like pulling excuses after excuse, after excuse, because he doesn't have a Pro Bowler at every position around him. Right. So that means it's everyone else's fault but his. So I'm not going to go there. I'm going to be a man of my word and not a hypocrite. If May doesn't do it this year, at least somewhat, then that's concerning.
It is. Everything, all signs point to the fact that we should see drastic improvement from Drake May in this offense this year. And you know what? You just talked about not getting that big A1 receiver yet. This year, I think, is going to be a tryout for that because the Patriots have
Yeah.
shown the last 2 years that they're going to aggressively throw their hat in the ring to go after these names, right?
Right.
But as
Yes.
we've talked about, like this has not been an attractive landing spot for one of those guys. And so if you can go out there and win 9 or 10 games, show that this is a really good young team that's only going to get better. Diggs has a good year. The offense looks good. Drake May is looking good. Like, I think you are in a prime position to land one of those A1 guys going into his third year. But
Yeah, and I think these guys want to play with good
they do.
quarterbacks, generally speaking. So
Yeah.
May has to come out and show he can make it. I mean, I say that, and then as I'm saying that, I'm thinking in my head what just happened with DK Metcalf, which we're going to get to when we get to around the league, where there's a black hole at quarterback. But generally speaking, these big time receivers, they want to put up numbers and be productive because that's good for their career. And if you don't have a good quarterback, it's really hard to be productive as a wide receiver.
Yeah.
So May has to show it on the field to bring those kind of players in. It's like one of those things where look, everything's set up. Let's see what he does, right?
Yeah, absolutely, and we will. But the one thing that we both said going into this season was we hope they do everything they can to help his situation. And I think again, it's not perfect. We don't have that DK Metcalf, but it's about as good as I think it could be for one
Yeah.
off season's worth of improvements.
Well, you just said everything they can, and
Right.
look what they did do. They did. I mean, they did what they could do. I think they would have maybe liked to have brought in a DK Metcalf, or I think Chris Godwin was the guy that they really wanted to bring in, but they couldn't. He didn't want to come here. He turned down $20 million. So
Right.
they did what they could. Kind of the next best thing was to bring in Diggs.
Yeah. Right.
All right, let's talk a little bit, Justin, about the first round in general. We really didn't talk too much about the whole draft. I don't know if you want to go pick by pick, probably not, but let's talk about some of these interesting picks in the top 10. We already talked about Jacksonville and Cleveland. We hit on that briefly, but let's talk about the Titans and Cam Ward and your take on Cam Ward as the number one pick in the draft.
I think the Cam Ward pick it's about as close to a crapshoot as you can get because it's like you got a guy who physically on paper, has the skills and has the talent to be really good, right? He's kind of like a Cam Newton-esque type of prototype, but like,
well, hold on, he's 40 pounds less.
Is he 40 pounds less?
He's listed at 219. Cam Newton was like 255.
See, I thought he was a little bigger than that.
No, he's small.
Interesting. I thought he was.
Yeah,
I thought
he's
he was
6'2",
a little bigger.
219. Yeah, I did too, because the way they talk about him.
They talked about him like he was 6'4", 250. Like that's what I thought he was.
Justin, Cam Ward would have been the 7th quarterback taken in 2024.
I agree. So that's kind of my thinking with him is like he was like anointed as the number one overall pick, but I think if you asked me which way I'm tilting, right, the old thumbs up or thumbs down in terms of what I think thumbs down. I'm not super hopeful for this kid.
Yeah, I agree. I don't love the pick. I think that it was a bit of a reach pick. It's kind of an any port in the storm thing.
Yeah.
This might be this year's Anthony Richardson type pick, or this year's Trey Lance type pick, or this year's Mac Jones type pick, where a desperate team reaches on a quarterback just because they're a quarterback. I don't think Cam Ward is the number one pick in the draft in the truest sense. I don't think he's as talented as most other quarterbacks taken that high in the draft. I think he would have been a 2nd round pick, or at least the 7th quarterback taken on the board in 2024. So, I don't know. And let's not forget too, he's not really going to the 2000 Rams either. Like there's not a lot of weapons. They got Calvin Ridley. They got the other receiver Hopkins there. Not a great team that he's going to. I feel like I don't know. I don't think it's going to work out.
Yeah. I don't think it's going to work out either. I think that team's got too many holes. I mean, I'm not super confident in that offense yet. I think the defense lost some key pieces from last year. Right?
And I'm not impressed with the player, Justin, too. Like, I don't
No,
want to point the finger at the team. I mean, I'm not a Cam Ward fan. I mean,
no.
as a second round pick, yeah, that's a great second round pick. As the number one pick in the draft, I watched him play a few times last year. I would not say he is at that level.
No, I would be shocked if Cam Ward went on to return the value that you expect to get from the number one overall
Right.
pick in the draft class.
Agree 100%. We talked about the Travis Hunter pick at number 2. I do think that I don't think that was a great move for Jacksonville. I'm interested to see how it works out. Love Travis Hunter, great kid, rooting for him 1,000%. Curious where he's going to play, cornerback or wide receiver, but I just think Trevor Lawrence is a total dud, and I think that he'll drag, you know, it'll probably be mediocre because they got a great team around him now, but I don't think Lawrence is ever gonna be the kind of quarterback that takes these guys to the next level.
No, you look, you're trying to put garnish in a turd sandwich over there. Okay.
Right.
Like Trevor Lawrence is not the guy. It's for some reason, and I don't look, I know that there's this narrative, there's this clear want from the media, from the NFL, from the league for him to pan out to be everything he was hyped up to be. And maybe that's clouding the judgment in what you get from sports media surrounding him as far as being a fair and accurate assessment. But it hasn't been difficult for us. We've said it from day one
Right.
that he's a bum. He is not nearly as good as people give him credit for, and that he's not a franchise quarterback. And so, I like Travis Hunter. I think he's a good player. I think he's talented. But like that to me, that aggressive move, and don't forget, it's not like you just had the number 2 pick and took Travis Hunter. You gave the farm to go get him, right? And you did that almost, it seems like, out of desperation to try to fix
Yep.
Trevor Lawrence. And I don't
Yeah.
think you can fix him.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people in the media love this move because they see it as an aggressive move. I just completely disagree. I see it as giving up a ton for a player that's not going to move the needle all that much. I will say I am really curious how the two-way player thing is going to work out over the course of the season. And you know, one of the things about this that's really interesting is like, you know, he did it in Colorado, which is high altitude. That's tough.
Yeah.
Now he's going to go to Florida, which is the hottest state in the country, really, right?
Yeah.
And humid hot. And granted, it's Jacksonville, not Miami. It's still really damn hot for like 3 months of the season now. Like, how is this whole two-way thing going to play out in like 95-degree heat?
But here's the thing: is like it could let's just for the sake of argument, let's say it works out. Let's say he's playing the majority of snaps on both sides of the ball. He's productive. He can handle it, right? Like that doesn't fix the fact that you really have a roster that has a ton of other holes. Your biggest one being franchise quarterback. So it's like
Yeah,
he could even exceed expectations, and I
right.
still don't think that means too much success for the Jaguars.
I almost wonder too, just knowing that team, if like everyone's like wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver, his best use for that team may actually be at cornerback because they really
100%.
need help on defense.
They do. They need it. They need it badly. And I think I I still look at that Jackson, like I look at this Patriots team and who had a ton of holes coming into this offseason, and I say, wow, we did a really good job to plug a bunch of them. I look at Jacksonville and I'm like, they plugged like one hole. Like they still
Right.
have a ton of leaks in that boat. And I still
Right.
think that they are gonna have a tough time competing. And I don't think even a successful two-way performance from Travis Hunter can change that.
Yeah, I agreed. Let's talk about the number 3 pick, Justin. This one I love, Abdul Carter
Yeah.
to the Giants. To me, this is the best pick. Well, of the first 3, I would say certainly.
Right.
Love this pick. Watch out for that Giants team. I think this is another team that quietly moved the needle. I think they're going to be a much better team. They still need a quarterback. But I think, brought in the best player in the draft, and that's Abdul Carter with the number 3 pick. Best player on the draft, needed help there. They already have two other really good defensive linemen.
Yeah.
They have Burns, and then they have that interior guy that Belichick loves. What's that guy's name? I forget. But they already have some pieces on that
And
defense.
do they still have that Thibodeau guy that they drafted?
They have that's the name, Thibodeau guy. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they have Malik Neighbors on offense. They've plugged the hole with Russell Wilson at quarterback. We've seen he can still be
Yeah.
okay. That Giants win team is going to be a 6, 7, 8 win team this year. I don't think they're going to be pathetic. And I like what they did in this draft. Also, Jackson Dart making a big move for him, and then drafting Cam Scatterbo in the 4th round. I love the Giants draft this year.
I did too. I really liked it. I think, like if Jackson Dart can come out in, I don't know. Well, first off, what are your thoughts? Is Jackson Dart a day one starter, or is he?
He is not a day one starter. He is not a day one starter. But I think he can come in, and I think he will be the starter by midseason.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's probably going to be similar to like the Drake May approach, where we see the Wilson will probably get the start, and depending on how he does, we'll probably see Dart, maybe somewhere towards the halfway point of the season.
Yep.
But the Dart's ceiling really has the ability to change everything, because that's actually not as bad of a roster as you mentioned that a lot of people may think. And if they can just get consistent, reliable, in quality play out of their quarterback, they're gonna fall backwards into 7 wins. So that's kind of my thinking. So
tough division, I'd say, is the only thing.
Tough division.
Yep. But still much better team in New York with the Giants. We talked about the Pats and Will Campbell. Let's go. Browns, number 5, Mason Graham. I don't have a lot to say about this pick. It was a sensible pick. It was a boring pick. Best player on the board. I like what they did. I mean, what we should talk about here, because we haven't discussed it yet, is the whole Shedeur Sanders thing, and his fall in the draft was like the story of the draft. But you got to give the Browns a little bit of credit. I feel like this was like Kevin Costner draft day, like passing on Sanders. Everybody wanted them to take them number 2. A couple months ago, they passed on him at 5. Obviously, they passed on him in the 2nd round twice. They passed on him in the 3rd round, and then they pulled a player in the 5th round. I mean, look, you got to respect the way they manipulated the board and still got the guy.
They did. And I believe he was actually like the 3rd quarterback they took, or 2nd or 3rd quarterback.
They took Dylan Gabriel.
They took Gabriel
in the 4th round.
I gotta say, if Shedeur Sanders even just becomes an average NFL quarterback, then that's the steal of the draft, right?
Absolutely.
They got great value. Just to go back to Mason Graham for a second, I say I don't like the pick just because I don't really love Mason Graham. I think something tells me he's a little overhyped, but we'll see. Yeah. Maybe he'll prove me wrong. But yeah, I think for a team like the Browns, who so desperately need a quarterback after the failed Deshaun Watson experiment, it would have been so easy for them to get a little too excited and a little and jump all over Shedeur Sanders or really anybody else prematurely. And they stayed patient. They played the long game. They called a bunch of other teams' bluff, and they still got their guy in the 5th round. So I got to give them credit for that.
I as well. I can't believe teams like the Steelers and the Saints and some of these quarterback desperate teams passed on Sanders multiple times in the draft. It's just like, how do you make sense of all that? I still believe in the player. I like Shedeur Sanders as a player. I always have. I said a few weeks ago, and this sounds stupid, but I wasn't the only one that said this. A lot of the so-called experts were saying this, including experts that played in the NFL, that they like Shedeur Sanders better than Cam Ward. Yeah. And it's like making sense of how far he fell is really hard to do. We've never seen anything like this. Like Aaron Rodgers fell to the 20s. We've had a few guys fall to the 2nd round. I don't think we've ever had someone as hyped and as highly expected to go that high fall to the 5th round. That's never happened.
No, it's never happened. And I think it sends a very clear message that I've heard a bunch of people say that, oh, well, he's not as talented as some people think. Maybe he's not as talented as some people think he is. He still should never have slid to the 5th round. Right. So it's like, that tells you that there's a clear off the field, a clear like attitude and tangible, something that's like very glaring. That was like a big red flag for a lot of teams.
So what was the fall about, Justin? Why did he fall?
That's what I think it was. I think that Shedeur Sanders is a victim of what we talked about, way back, I believe last season, which is the fact that the college game is now getting an injection of all of the worst parts that the professional aspect introduces into the sport, which is the ego, the
Yeah.
attitude, the negative attention, right? And Shador Sanders, I can't think of anybody who had to deal with that more. I mean, the guy was constantly in the spotlight. He was constantly, getting ragged on for his arrogance and his attitude and all that stuff. And you know what? Like, I think at the end of the day, I think the NFL was just kind of taking a step back and saying, look, we don't care who your dad is. We don't care how many cameras were in your face in college. Like, we don't care how good you think you are. You haven't played an NFL snap yet. And I think it was a rebuttal on this whole, you know, that this new collegiate star, I think, that we're seeing.
Yeah, I agree with that, Justin. But I think like I would say a couple things about the Shadur Sanders thing. One is don't look for larger trends in this thing. This isn't about anything bigger than what it was. This was about a young man that interviewed extremely poorly
Right.
at all these interviews and had a father that is a legend and a multimillionaire that enabled him
Yep.
to get away with things to this point that even the most cocky and arrogant and clueless of these young men could not have gotten away with.
Yes.
And I think this kid showed up in these interviews with an attitude and a sense of entitlement that turned people off. I don't think it was about race. I don't think it was about his performance on the field. I think it was about the attitude. And I also think it was a little bit about the fact that he's been protected by his father his whole life and people being concerned. What is this guy going to be when he doesn't have his father looking over his shoulder at all times? Now, all that said, okay, I think that the league made a huge mistake in passing on this kid. I get second round. I maybe get third round. When it got to fourth or fifth round and you're the Pittsburgh Steelers or you're the New Orleans Saints and you know Derek Carr is injured and may retire, the Steelers have no quarterback. How do you not take a chance on this kid? I still believe, I think this was the best thing that could have happened to him. I really do.
Yeah.
Don't you agree?
Yes.
Because this is the wake-up call a kid like this needs to be like, wow, I'm a fifth round pick. I can't bring in my $1 billion attitude when I'm making a rookie fifth round contract. Like I have to come in, work hard, and prove that I can do it. There is something good and nice about Shedeur Sanders' attitude. Like he's not a bad kid at all.
Right.
And I think this was the wake-up call that maybe he needed that will probably benefit him in the long term in terms of his career as an NFL player.
I agree, actually. I totally agree that this is the type of you know, cliche welcome to the NFL moment, right? Where it's like, oh, I actually do got to work hard. These guys don't want to put up with my bull crap. I'm not the big man on campus anymore like I was at Colorado. Like I think that's where all of that really hopefully settles in with a guy like that, because I agree with you. I do think he's talented. I think when you're that talented, and given how important of a position quarterback is and how many how many teams still need a franchise quarterback, I think it's inexcusable for him to fall that far. But it just tells me that like there was just such glaring red flags. And one of the ones that, again, like we kind of touched on it, but it's like, who wants to turn on ESPN? What organization, what head coach, what GM wants to turn on ESPN Monday morning and see his father, getting interviewed, talking about how the team failed Shedeur on Sunday, and what
Right.
the team needed to do better. And if they only did, and they're not doing that, and they're not doing that, and they need to be doing that. What organization wants that? You know what I mean?
Right.
So like,
but all that narrative dies now because he's a fifth round pick.
right.
So I think this, in a sense, it really sets him up for success in that it eliminates some of the narratives that might have really undermined him if he had been a first round pick.
Yeah, exactly. And hopefully it did the most important thing, which is put his head on straight and light a fire under him. Because This you should never be more motivated than when you make it
Right.
to the NFL. You know what I mean?
Because let's be honest too. Like we talk about his talents, and look, maybe he wasn't the number two pick in the draft from talent wise, but Mac Jones was the 15th pick in the
Right.
draft. You know, I
Right.
mean, Shedeur Sanders is no worse than a second round talent.
Yeah. No, look, I I was I mean, goes to show how much I knew, but I placed one bet on the entire NFL draft, and that it was the Giants would take Shador at
Right.
number 3, right? And so like, you know, to think that he was getting talked about as a potential top 5 pick, potential number 1 overall pick, and then to fall to the 5th round, just completely uncharted territory. It's like it it was a wild, wild sight to see. I kinda got it when he made it out of the 1st round, but then once I saw some of those teams passing on him in the 2nd and 3rd round, I was like, "What's going on? Like,
Yeah.
what the heck is happening?"
Right.
And so, yeah, I hope for him it's an opportunity to get motivated, get his head on straight, and just understand that he has to earn his spot. He's not just the anointed one from college, you
Can
know?
you imagine if he had showed up for the draft in Green Bay? I mean, looking back, that was one of the best decisions ever, was not
Yeah.
going to Green Bay for the draft. Imagine if he had to sit there for 5 frigging rounds.
Let me ask you this. I wonder when that decision was made. Do you think that decision was made after potentially hearing whispers that he doesn't have the interest that he wanted?
Yes, but I don't think they thought he was going to fall
Yeah,
that
exactly.
far.
They didn't know the
I
extent
think
of it.
they
Right.
probably
Right.
figured we don't want him to fall to the second round.
Right.
So we're not going to even, he's going to fall. He could fall to the second round.
Right. We're not
We're
going to
not
give
going
them the
to do it.
satisfaction. Right. Yeah.
Right. And then thank God they decided that for his, it would have been so embarrassing.
Yeah.
What about the prank call to Sanders? Now that is something that is a crazy story that the Falcons defensive coordinator's son
Yeah.
pranks him. And I'm like, the father got fined $100,000. The organization got fined 250 grand. And I'm like, is the kid going to pay it back from his allowance? You know? Right? How do you pay that back?
I,
If my kids don't eat like half a sandwich, I'm like pissed. I'm like, you wasted so much food. $100,000.
I mean, dude, it, it's first off, I have to say, it was a good prank. Like it was a
It
good
was a good
prank, man.
prank. Yeah, it was a
Like I
pretty good
thought it was.
prank.
I thought it was kind of like to pull something off like that, like to get a hold of Shador Sanders on draft night. Like
Right.
I thought that was kind of funny. I mean, I think we
Uh,
both know each other's. We're fans of prank calls from back in the day. You know what I mean? A
yeah.
good prank call never hurt nobody. But that was definitely something that I mean. I was kind of scratching my head a little bit because it was like, okay, it'd be one thing if when I first saw it, I thought it was like, okay, I mean, look, the kid was in college. I'm sure he gave out his number. I'm sure that number maybe exchanged hands and got into the wrong hands. But like the fact that like this kid went into his father's like laptop and like extracted the phone number, like something like that, like really is kind of a wild story.
I'm going to disagree a little because like I love a good prank call, but it has to be harmless. And I think that this was a little bordering into like harmful because the country's watching this guy Sanders, and like you're messing with his career, his livelihood. Like I don't know, like I feel like okay, like prank calling the pizza place or like saying you're the
Yeah.
someone or like that's one thing, but like on doing that on a national stage to someone in a way that almost humiliates and embarrasses someone and like one of the biggest moments of their life. I don't know. Like, I mean, yeah, like, all right, credit for like the scheming to pull it off, fine. But there's a little bit of cruelness in that. I'm like, I don't know. I think that was just a
The-
little further than what should be done. I mean, a good prank really should be harmless. Give me like a good fart noise in the
yeah.
Walmart prank. That's all well and good, but this was a little mean.
Well, you know what? I gotta say, in fairness too, I don't think they ever actually thought it would work, right? Like to
Right.
me, that was like something that it was just like
Fair.
some dumb college kids like laughing at themselves, thinking, "Wouldn't that be hysterical if we did that?" And I don't think any of them actually anticipated Shador Sanders picking up the phone in falling for it, right? So it was
Yeah.
probably one of those things where it was like, it was more so just a funny thought And then they wound up being on the phone with him like, holy crap, we actually got a
Right.
hold of him,
I
you
think
know?
other players got pranks too. I don't
Yeah,
think it
he
was
wasn't the
just
only one.
Sanders.
I,
Yeah, there was like 3 or 4. I think
yes.
someone else got one. Abdul Carter might have got one. And
I think he did. I think Abdul Carter did say he got one.
yeah.
Yeah. So I mean,
But it made it so bad for Sanders because of the fall. Like Abdul
right.
Carter is the last laugh, right?
Yeah,
I'm
he's
in
like,
between
oh,
picks.
okay, yeah.
Eat shit. But
Right, right,
when you
right.
fall the 5th round, then it's like it gets to be it's like it's sad is what it is.
Yeah.
It's like throwing salt on the wounds.
Exactly, exactly. And yeah, if you're that dad that could, what is it?
Oh,
Albert, Ross Albert,
yep.
is that his
The
name?
Jeff Albert, I
Albert,
think.
something like
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I mean, if you're him, it's probably just like you're probably looking at that going, I didn't like. How do you even respond to that? Like you
How do you
said,
punish
like
him? He's in
exactly.
college, right?
Yeah, the kid's like a
Did you think he
20-year-old.
spanked him?
I know, like what do you like? He's an adult. What are you gonna like? You can't grab like
Locked him in his room?
yeah,
Put him
lock
in
in
his
his
room?
room. Like I mean,
Early bedtime?
yeah, I don't understand how you do that. And like you said, it's like the guy got drafted like over $100,000. Like it's beyond it's beyond like denting the family car and being like, okay,
No,
you're gonna pay
no,
for that.
right.
Like you know,
Could you
it's like
imagine costing your
yeah,
parents 100K, a cool 100K like that?
that crazy, absolutely crazy.
Crazy.
I mean, I'm sure I
Crazy.
would imagine after that got leaked, I you know, I bet those kids are really regretting it now because I'm sure they're getting all sorts of threats and hate
Yeah.
mail and all that stuff. And you know what? I'm sure what they initially intended to be just like a wild, like funny idea actually wound up having real life, real world, serious
Do you
repercussions.
think
And
the father considered disowning the son at that point? Do you think you just like, you look, you're 19, 20 years old. Like, I'm washing my hands. You're a shithead. Go, you're done. I'm done with you.
if he got fired, if
100K,
he got,
100K.
yeah, the 100K, yeah. If he had lost his job on top of that, then I think disowning is is definitely in the conversation at that point. I mean,
Oh,
you think about like how coveted it is to be affiliated with pro
totally.
sports, right? And it's like
Totally.
that guy's living the dream. He has a dream job. And to
Yeah.
think that your moron knucklehead college son put that
Oh,
all at risk, like it's brutal.
yeah. It really is. It is such bad judgment. I mean, stick to like prank calling the local pizza place
Right.
or whatever, Chinese whatever place or whatever. Like that's all one thing,
Right.
whatever. This was way it got out of hand fast
It did. And but
for that young
at
man.
least kudos to him because he owned up to it and he took
He did. His
responsibility
apology was
for it.
sincere. Hey,
Yeah.
and kudos to Sanders for kind of being cool about it too, by the way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, you know what?
Taking the call and everything.
Exactly. Look, at that point, a prank call was probably the least of his concerns. You know what I mean?
I'll tell you right now. I've been watching the Facebook Reels the last 2 days of Sanders at Browns rookie camp, and I'm gonna just 100%. I'm 10,000% rooting for this guy. Like I have probably not rooted for almost any non-Patriot player in recent memory because I just feel like, I don't know, I want this guy to succeed. I don't think he's a bad kid. I think he got a ton of shit. Maybe he was a little ignorant. Maybe he was a little naive. Maybe he was a little cocky. But you know what? I think he's a good kid, and I want him to rise above all this.
And honestly, we talk about it all the time. You know, we're fans of the Patriots, but we're also fans of the sport. We're fans of the
Yep.
league, right? And it's
Yep.
great for the league. It's great for the NFL if Shador Sanders fights through this adversity and rises to be a serviceable franchise
Yeah.
quarterback. You know,
A starting quarterback.
starting
No
quarterback,
question
exactly.
about it. Okay. Other picks in the top 10 worth mentioning. We already talked about Genty. I don't know what most to say about that, except I don't think that's a great fit in Oakland or Las Vegas, I should say. I think that keeps him in mediocrity. How about the Jets at 7? Justin going offensive tackle, boring pick to me.
Yeah.
This is the Jets playing for Arch Manning or the guy from LSU, Nussmeier, who's coming out, who's supposedly going to actually be higher rated than Arch Manning next year, which is crazy, but going to be a very strong quarterback class in 2026. And it looks to me like the Jets are just totally all in on kicking the can down the road and trying to get good draft pick next year.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally. And I mean, I can't really blame them. I feel like they're I think they're looking at a last place finish in this division potentially. I think this is a team in need of a core rebuild at key positions. And so yeah, I think they're just trying to put the infrastructure in place to soften the landing spot for whoever comes here next year.
Yeah, Garrett Nessmeyer, by the way, is that guy. So you're
Yes.
gonna have a 1-2 at least quarterback punch. That's probably gonna be far in excess of anything that was close to what was available this year.
Right.
So I think you're gonna see a lot of teams do that. Ted McMillan at 8. This is an interesting pick. Going to a team that was surprisingly good on offense coming down the stretch in Carolina. People really got down on Ted McMillan as the draft went on. So he
Yeah.
was not expected to even go this high. Carolina must have fell in love with him, which is why they took a chance on him, putting him in a situation where there are actually some offensive weapons in place. The receiver Xavier, not worthy. The other Xavier Leggett,
Yeah.
the quarterback. Oh my God,
Bryce Young.
Bryce Young.
Yeah.
That came on strong. Good running back. That could be an explosive offense in Carolina.
It could be. I mean, I was a little surprised just because I thought there were other positions of need for them, right? Like I thought they might have gone like edge rusher or like
Defense.
cornerback. Yeah, exactly. I thought they were probably going to go defense. But again, it's another example, and we've seen it like, the last couple of years in the NFL, which is teams will double and triple down uh, to try to extract as much value as they can from their high draft capital quarterbacks because nobody wants to admit defeat and move on when you have such a coveted position that you put a ton of draft. I mean, look, just think back to what the Panthers invested into getting Bryce Young, right? Like not only taking him with the number 1 pick, but everything they had to trade to move up and get that. It's like it's very reminiscent of what they're doing in Jacksonville, Trevor Lawrence, where they're doubling and tripling down, trying to get the most out of their quarterback.
Yeah. And like to your point you brought up earlier too, like, the thing with Bryce Young is he was really on the ropes last year. He lost his job to Andy Dalton. He might not have got it back if Dalton didn't get hurt.
Yeah.
So he had zero expectations.
Right.
And this year he played so well that now there will be expectations
Exactly.
again. Now they make this move for Ted McMillan. There aren't going to be a lot of excuses for him. He's in his 3rd season. So the pressure will be on Bryce Young to prove that last year was not like a fluke or just the fact that a lot of teams were sleeping on them.
Right. Right. Exactly. So, yeah, I mean, but again, he's going to have no excuses now because he's going to have weapons. Don't even forget too. They took that, I believe it was the running back in like the 1st round last year or 2nd round last year who didn't even play a snap. I forget the kid's name, but so like this should be like a pretty decent offense in terms of their weapons. So
it should be. Should be. It will be interesting to watch. Kelvin Banks going to New Orleans at 9. I'm surprised the Saints did not go quarterback here. I guess they didn't believe in Jackson Dart. Of course, they took Tyler. What's his name?
Yeah,
Tyler
Show or something like that. Yeah.
Yeah. Later in the draft. I mean, so they bring in Banks, which is again another sensible pick. Derek Carr retires this week. Again, this to me is another team that's playing for Arch Manning or playing for Garrett Nussmeier in 2020. 2 guys that both have Louisiana ties, by the way, in 2026. I don't think the Saints are really in it to win it in 25.
No, I don't think they are either. I think you're 100% right. I think that's what they're doing. They're padding the roster for whoever they bring in next year.
Colston Loveland 10 to the Bears. I'll tell you, one of the interesting stories of this draft, we saw this last year. The Bears did everything they could to surround Caleb Williams with talent. They literally tripled down on that this year with all the drafting Luther Burden, drafting Colston Loveland, all kinds of draft capital on offense, free agency on offense. It's I think one of the stories is this year is going to be if Caleb Williams can actually do it this year with what he has around him.
Yeah, and I agree with that. The other thing that I thought was pretty interesting was I think just the fact that I don't know about you, but I hadn't heard anything about this Colston Loveland kid being the best tight end of the draft.
Yeah.
Like to me,
yeah, that's right. He went ahead of Warren.
Right,
that's
he went ahead of Warren. So it's like, again, does Ben Johnson, the Bears, see something that other teams didn't? I don't know, but yeah, all signs are pointing to Tyler Warren being that first tight end off the board. So it was like, okay, that was kind of a statement by the Bears.
Yeah, it was a big statement, and I mean, a gutsy move. The only thing I can think of is they've got Cole Kmet already, who's kind of that bigger
Yeah.
tight end. Maybe fits a little more in the Tyler Warren mold.
Yeah. Yeah.
Loveland is more like your H back, type, smaller, quicker, almost like a slot receiver type tight end. So
Right.
maybe they wanted a different paradigm of player. What's interesting too is, Ben Johnson making this pick. I find it interesting, just going all in on Loveland with the number 10 pick, passing on Warren, and obviously explosive offense in Detroit, and wondering how Johnston might view Loveland and how he might fit into that in Chicago.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, look, you talk about another guy who's got no excuses. They went out and they revamped his offensive line. He's got top tier weapons at every position. And they got, who's considered to be a very smart, um, bright, offensive minded coach. So, you know what? Like, Caleb Williams has no excuses this year. Talk about a guy who's
Yeah,
got a
that will
paper
be a
shutout.
guy that's
Right.
really interesting to see because I don't believe in him either.
Right. Me neither. So,
Other things in the draft you like, Justin? I'll throw out just a couple at you that I like. I liked Tyler Booker to Dallas, sensible pick for a team that needs help on their line.
mm,
I liked Emeke Egbuka to Tampa Bay.
yeah.
There probably are other needs on that roster, but just saturating Baker Mayfield with weapons, and the receivers are getting old there. He could be a guy, if you're looking for a fantasy kind of sleeper, 10th, 11th round type situation, I would keep that name in mind. And then ditto that with the guy, Omarion Hampton from the Chargers, who I think will be probably their starting running back on a team that should be pretty good and likes to run the ball.
Yeah. Yeah. Those are all some pretty interesting picks. I mean, there was a couple that I scratched my head a little bit. Like, Green Bay's got a ton of young talent in that wide receiver room. They went out and got Matthew Golden. And that's not a knock on Matthew Golden. I really like Matthew Golden, but it's like I
Yeah.
thought wide
Didn't
receiver
seem like their
was
most pressing
no,
need.
no, it was one of the last positions I thought they were going to take a flyer on. Um, a couple of the teams, I was a little surprised with some of the picks, but overall, I thought it was an interesting draft. I love what some of the teams did. I love the fact that the Falcons went double edge rusher, traded back up into the first, got themselves 2 first-round edge rushers
Yep.
to add to that defense because that front seven was probably the weakest spot on that roster. There was a lot of
And they
interesting
whiffed on
picks.
Matthew Judon.
Exactly. They whiffed on Judon. Yeah, it was very interesting to see some of the picks. I think again, we talked about it before the draft. I don't know how many of those guys will be stars, but I think a lot of them will be starters for years to come in the NFL.
Yeah, and this was one of those drafts where like the 10 through 50th picks were more or less all similarly rated.
Yeah.
So, you just take your stab on which one you think is best,
Right.
and we'll see what happens in 3 years. We'll see who was actually right and who was wrong.
Right. Right. Exactly.
All right, couple of quick things around the league, and then we're gonna wrap it up. I do want to talk about this Pickens trade, George Pickens trade to Dallas. I think that's an interesting trade for both teams.
Very.
Is this the year, Justin, that the Steelers finish below 500 for the first time? Like, I don't know what they're doing in Pittsburgh. I thought that the strategy might have been, we'll bring in Metcalf. We have Metcalf and Pickens, good offensive weapons, great defense. We can win with Mason Rudolph. Now you're trading Pickens, who's a number one receiver. There's no quarterback on that roster that at all. I mean, Mason Rudolph is their starter. There's no young guy that they're developing. I don't know what they're doing on that Pittsburgh team. They're waiting for Aaron Rodgers. I don't believe in Aaron Rodgers. I don't think at this point Aaron Rodgers moves the needle for them at all. I feel like finally at long last, this might be the year the Steelers end up below 500. I just don't see how they fix this quarterback problem in time for this year.
Yeah, in the other thing, I look, I agree with all that, and I think the other thing that like, I don't know, I just can't get over is the fact that you're playing in a division with Lamar Jackson and Joe Burrow, right? So it's like, great, you bring in DK Metcalf, great, you got a good defense, great, you got a good head coach, but it's like, if you don't have a quarterback that can compete, how do you expect to surpass either of those two teams? And just and forget about just that division. We talk about how quarterback heavy the AFC in general is. I I just don't understand how you put all your eggs in the Aaron Rodgers basket. I thought for sure they were going to be buyers of Jackson Dart, and when Shador fell, I thought like, oh, that's a gimme. Like when Shador fell to when I watched the Steelers in the second round pass on Shador, that's when I was like, oh, something weird's going on, because I just couldn't understand it for the life of me.
What has happened since then that makes you understand the way that they're approaching the quarterback position in Pittsburgh? It's hard to figure out. That it looks
It's
like a
very tough.
ready to compete team. If you put a good quarterback on that team, and they would be a Super Bowl type caliber team, they're going into the season with, I think, and tell me if I'm wrong, maybe one of the two worst quarterback situations in the league, besides New Orleans. I mean, even New Orleans has Spencer Rattler
Right.
on their roster, which I think would be an upgrade from Mason Rudolph.
Yeah.
So I don't know. I don't know what they're doing. And like, I mean, if they're holding out hope for Aaron Rodgers, like, did you look at the tape from how he played for the Jets last year? Like, guy's a total flake and really not that good anymore. So it is just really hard to make sense of.
Yeah. Super tough to make sense of.
What about from the Dallas side? Did you like the acquisition of Pickens?
I do. Yeah. I mean, I think if you're Dallas, you're really trying to, yeah, I don't know. I guess you're trying to do everything you can, because, I feel like everything coming out of that organization since the end of last year, including last year, has been negative. So you got to do everything you can to build that roster up. I like the move with Pickens.
We know Prescott was best when he had two really good wide receivers around him.
Right. Right. So maybe, I mean, maybe this is their last Hail Mary, like, and again, maybe I misread this, but did I see that Pickens, like, after getting to Dallas, already like requested a trade, like shortly after getting there?
I don't know if that's true or not,
I
but
don't
I
know.
do know that that exiting Pittsburgh, that the reason they traded him was that he was very complicated and there was a lot of off the field stuff and stuff in the locker room. And I'm
Right.
looking at the Dallas team, and like my first reaction to that trade was, oh, this is great. This is great. Prescott needs that second weapon. The more I think about it, I'm like, wait a second. There are a lot of personalities in that Dallas locker room. Prescott is is going to get caught up, I think, in a lot of those locker room dynamics. I think he has already, and you're adding now another complicated personality into the mix. And you have a coach that's a rookie coach
Yeah.
that probably is not capable of managing. I mean, you've got Micah Parsons and CeeDee Lamb and Prescott, and and now you're adding in George Pickens, and there's been all this off the field and the Joneses, and it just sets up to me to be like a disaster. A
Right.
fantasy win, but an on field wins and losses not working out kind of thing.
Agreed. I think the Cowboys, I think this year are going to be one of those teams that week in, week out, you have no clue what you're going to get from them. And they
Yep.
can win potentially any game and lose potentially any game.
Yeah. Did you see their opening at Philadelphia for the Thursday night game?
Oh, no, I didn't see that.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. That's a tough
opening.
hand to start with right off the bat.
Yeah.
To begin with, that's always a tough spot to be in, that road team in that opening game.
Definitely. Yeah.
All right. Go ahead, brother.
No, I was just going to say, yeah, that's a tough draw. And honestly, I'm going to need to see a lot more from Dallas, because right now I just don't see how they compete in that division.
Yeah.
And
there's still a lot of holes on that team. And I mean, the most sensible thing the thing they did was drafting the best guard in the draft at the number 12 pick. That's the kind of pick that Dallas usually doesn't make.
Right.
They're usually drafting, CeeDee Lamb or the sexy first round pick, the sensible, grassroots kind of pick. Dallas hasn't done that enough. So I like that, but I just think it's too little too late. It'll be interesting to see if throwing Pickens in the mix, actually they can hold it together enough to make it yield results on the field. My sense is they won't.
Right. Yeah. I agree. I don't think they'll be able to get over the hump with Pickens, but it should make them at least more of a threat. So
nice. All right, man. Any other things you want to add about this draft? We're going to wrap up this draft recap. Final thoughts. We got a long off season still ahead of us. It gets better. We got mini camp coming up.
Yeah. The rookies in camp right now, right? rookie camps going on, I believe.
Celtics and Red Sox, keep the time, keep us interested in something until we get to training camp in July.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, we got our little dose of football for the offseason. Now it dulls back down for a little bit. But you know what? Again, at least we can go into this lull as Patriots fans satisfied with what's been done so far.
It's going to be a good year this year. I'm excited to see what the schedule. We'll do something for the schedule release. The schedule release on Wednesday. We should do something next week and just kind of do the whole win-loss thing, even if it's just something quick. Just now that you actually see how it all lays out, that always is useful to, I think, really develop our impressions of what we think the team's record is going to be. Like, for example, last year, I think we were kind of more positive about the Patriots. And then when we saw the schedule come out and it was all laid out in front of us, we're like, wait a sec, that's a tough schedule. Very. And where are the wins on that schedule?
Yes, exactly. But no, this year, I think it should be a lot more favorable for us. And I think we have a team that can take advantage of it, hopefully.
Yeah. So. Agree 1,000%. And all right, man, let's wrap it up. I want to say thanks to everyone listening to this episode of the Dr. Football from the Patriots Pod. Find us on Facebook, find us on YouTube channel. We will catch you all next time. Have a great day, and thank you very much.